I am continuing my journey through Before the Muses by Benjamin R. Foster, and I come to what Benjamin R. Foster has entitled Hymn to Tiglath-Pileser I. But there is an alternate title. This is in the notes at the end. I've also found this on the internet. The alternate title is A Heroic Poem in Honor of Tiglath-Pileser I, Muṣru-Qumanu Campaign. And I like that second title a little bit better, A Heroic Poem, because this strikes me not so much as a hymn as it is a heroic poem about a great battle. Although, arguably, this all comes back to semantics. What's the difference between a hymn and a poem, etc.? But to me, I think of a poem as I think of a hymn as like in praise of a deity. And this has got some deities in it, but it's more of like a heroic description of a battle. It's very short, just a couple pages here in this edition. I looked it up online, and there is some additional information on the internet, particularly archive.org has a 50-page article that was published by the University of Chicago Press back in 1990, which is going over the significance of this very short poem or hymn. And I'll link to it in the description down below. Not all of it is understandable for the layperson. They talk about, for example, some of the original Assyrian language and some of the Akkadian language. Akkadian is Assyrian, essentially. But anyways, talk about some of the original language and the poetic devices, etc., which isn't understandable unless you know the original language. But if you skip past that, they do talk about the history of this and the themes and the religion, and if you skim through it and take out the interesting parts or the understandable parts, it might be worth checking out. And certainly I will use what I learned from reading that article in this summary and discussion. So it's very short. University of Chicago Press mentions that it's a little bit difficult to classify this. It's not quite long enough to be called an epic, but they said they do have these. There are apparently other works of a similar genre, which are short descriptions of battles, which they suggest perhaps the name of hymnus would be appropriate for them. And I guess maybe that's where we get the hymn here, hymn to Tiglath-Pileser, which is what Benjamin R. Foster has called it. So Tiglath-Pileser I is somebody who is described in this book here on Assyria, which I've previously read and reviewed on this channel. It's somebody who was king of Assyria during the time when the Hittite Empire was being weakened by Armenian invasions, and used that time to expand the boundaries of Assyria, and has a number of inscriptions bragging about his military conquests. But a point which is made both in this book and in Benjamin R. Foster's introduction to the hymn to Tiglath-Pileser I is that behind these inscriptions bragging about these military conquests, there actually were a fair amount of, there actually probably were some military defeats which are being swept under the rug. One of the things that is mentioned in this book on Assyria is that although Tiglath-Pileser I portrayed himself as winning a number of decisive victories against mountain tribes, in reality these victories probably were not very decisive. The mountain tribes faded away into the wilderness. They used guerrilla warfare. They were never solidly defeated. But this hymn here is against a bunch of mountain tribes. It starts off with the mountain tribes all plotting together. So there's a bunch of them that join together in a coalition here to plot war against Assyria. The University of Chicago Press makes a couple of points about this poem. One, it contrasts, I guess, with some of the annals we have from Tiglath-Pileser I's reign, which show that these may have been individual campaigns instead of one big campaign against a big coalition. And two, that in the annals it looks like Assyria is more the aggressor. So Assyria wants to expand its territory and so is attacking these tribes. But in this poem here, or this hymn, it's the mountain tribes who are getting together into the coalition to attack Assyria. So once the mountain tribes are getting ready for battle, then the scene of action in this poem/hymn cuts to a council of the gods. And there's some text missing. There's always some text missing in these Akkadian works. But Enlil is bringing the matter before the gods. And then Assur, who is the patron god of Assyria, I believe, after a break in the text, says that he wants to completely slaughter the enemy, destroy the foe. And he gets the rest of the gods to agree. And then the gods join the Assyrians in the battle. And yes, it's described here. So they make proud the weaponry of the Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser I. Enlil leads him into battle. Ishtar, mistress of turmoil, aroused him to strife. Ninurta, foremost of the gods, positioned himself at his front. Nuxa was slaughtering all the enemies at his right. Adad overwhelmed his foes at his left. Stationed behind him, he was raining down weaponry. I assume this is still Adad. So as Tiglath-Pileser I is going into battle, he's surrounded by all these gods who are also fighting with them. And then the last bit of the poem, and again this is very short, just describes the devastation that they inflict on their enemies. So he conquers every one of their sanctuaries. Their lofty cities, all there are, he demolishes. He tears up the grain from the fields that sustains them. He cuts down the fruit trees. He destroys the gardens. He makes a deluge pass over the mountains. He casts terror upon them, etc. And then it finishes, or it doesn't really finish. There are 5 fragmentary lines which break off. So it looks like, unfortunately, we are missing the beginning and the end of this little poem. There's 5 lines at the beginning which are missing, and 5 lines at the end which are missing, and some missing text here in the middle. All of these Akkadian works seem to be missing some text. So there you are. That is the heroic poem in honor of Tiglath-Pileser's Muṣru-Qumanu campaign, or Hymn to Tiglath-Pileser I.